I think back even on my journey, and it's been multiple different times when I had suggested that we do something very different, from moving cities to across the country to starting and or joining a family business and all sorts of things like that. And having a supportive significant other is, I think, one of the catalysts that I've seen for success.
You post a job and you pray a great employee applies, and you find and hire that person. So that can be 200 to 300 or 400 people, essentially. And so I like to come in and say, let me help you find the needle in the haystack that you're looking for, the purple squirrel, the unicorn, whatever analogy you want to put on it.
There is a lot of hype, and there's a lot of different tools that are coming out, and some of them are truly new, really cool tools. Others are really just wrappers of the underlying technology. But being able to take a step back and say, what are the core things that I can train something on, that I can learn on really well. I tend to be in the camp of I do believe everybody should be doing something with AI. If you're not using it, you are going to fall behind.
I was in a coaching group and they were talking about letting go of anything that you have ego around. So what do you think that you do so well that nobody else could possibly ever learn to do? And that's probably you're doing it because you have an ego around it. And so I told my VA the other day, I was like, all right, you're going to handle all scheduling, because while I can do it and I'm good at it, is that the best use of my time? No.
Today's guest is Justin Dixon, the founder and the CEO of Hire Tomorrow. After nearly 2 decades in corporate recruiting, Justin made the leap to start his own firm. And this was just weeks before the world shut down in 2020. What looked like terrible timing ended up being the catalyst that shaped his entrepreneurial path. Justin and his team now help private equity groups and startups land the talent that they need to scale. And he's also an angel investor, a podcast host, and even an Ironman athlete. In this episode, we dig into the lessons of leaving corporate, building a business intentionally, and the future of hiring in the age of AI. Let's dive in. Justin, welcome to the Ownership Advantage. Now, we were talking offline here, so I want to start with something here. You left a comfortable corporate career right before the pandemic. I know that most people would have played it safe in this instance here. Take us back to that moment. What was going through your mind?
Yeah, I guess I was excited because I'd kind of had the entrepreneurial bug for a few years. I'm a very risk-averse person by nature, and so is my wife. And so it took us a while to get very comfortable with like the notion of quitting a job that I was making, 6 figures, and it was very comfortable and easy, and to start your own thing was nerve-wracking. And luckily, COVID was not, this was January of 2020. So luckily, COVID was not a global pandemic, because if it would have been, if I would have waited another month or two, probably I would never have done it. I would have been too scared, no way, because also the world got shut down, and so nobody was hiring. So starting a recruiting business in the wake of a global pandemic wouldn't have been the smartest idea. So I guess when I did it, it was excitement, but obviously nervous excitement, and then it turned into, oh shit, what did I do?
I was doing a little bit of homework, a little bit of research before our conversation, and I came across a couple of things that I think either you've written or written about you, or other interviews that you've given. And I noticed somewhere that I think you might have said that you and your wife spent about 2 years preparing to make this leap. Was that correct?
Probably, yeah, if I went back and actually thought about it. So going back to, so it was January 2020 when I quit. 2017, 2018, we read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or I read it, had my brain kind of switch to like, oh, I don't have to punch a clock. I don't have to work for somebody else. I should be investing my time and my money and effort into things that are going to generate me revenue versus helping a company grow. And so it just kind of flipped our mindset. My wife read it and had the exact same reaction because, again, we are both very risk averse. And so we jumped in with both feet. We are both W-2 employees. And we had a little bit of cash that we were like, hey, let's invest it. So we bought a duplex out in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We were living in Philadelphia at the time. I grew up in Pennsylvania. And so we bought this duplex. It was going to cash flow, and it was going to be the start of our like real estate investing journey. And it went well for the first, call it 6 months, because we bought it in May of 2019. So the first kind of half year was decent. And kind of throughout 2019, we were very intentional about downgrading our lives as much as we possibly could, because our goal was to essentially limit as much risk as we possibly could. So we owned a condo in Philadelphia. We ended up renting that out. We moved to the suburbs and rented a lower, lesser quality, smaller apartment. We only had one vehicle. We kept just one vehicle, where all of our friends are having kids, buying big houses, buying better vehicles, et cetera. We were doing the exact opposite. We were just condensing, not restricting necessarily. We were just saying, what is waste? What can we kind of constrain? Because the goal was to get our life expenses to a level that my wife's salary would cover them. So that if I jumped out, started a business, which is inherently risky, and if I didn't make any money or I hated it or whatever, it wasn't going to destroy our financial future. So we were very intentional about building that financial foundation so that we felt comfortable. We had 2 investment properties at that time, cash flowing. We had tenants in them. And then, we downgraded our lives to the point where our expenses were pretty much covered. So I could jump out and take a leap, and that's what we did. And so it was very much intentional. Probably took us probably about 2 years, at least a year and a half, to really get ready. And then we got kicked in the mouth right a month or so after. So you never can plan for the worst, because there is potentially a worse scenario than you can even think of.
Oh man, there's 2 things in there that you said that I really want to kind of pull back out, because I think it's really important for the audience. The first one is downgrading your life, or making that choice to. So there's 2 things that come to mind on this specific topic. The first one being, how did you do that in amongst all of the folks that you did know that were upgrading houses, getting nicer cars? Like, most people will recognize that that's easier said than done when you're actually around an environment that maybe isn't doing that. And understanding that a lot of people that may be listening to this are interested or would kind of be willing to make the leap to business ownership, but aren't willing to do that prep work, aren't willing to downgrade their lifestyle. So maybe talk to us a little bit about making that choice. Was that an easy choice to do for you and your wife? What advice would you give to others that are struggling with being able to downgrade their life a little bit?
Yeah, and I would say a couple things. One, we were not overly restrictive. So we were still going out to dinner. We were still golfing. Like, we were still like living our lives. We just weren't doing a ton of extra. And the good thing is, my wife and I were in 100% lockstep on the whole thing. We were both aligned. I could definitely see this being a very challenging endeavor if one of you is, I want to pull back on our expenses, while the other one is like, I want to maintain or expand our expenses. I want to, go to Hawaii next month, whatever the case is, right? So, but our goal was, we were like, okay, let's take some kind of, take some risk off the table, because the goal was essentially, okay, I'm going to jump out, start my business. If anybody knows the math around recruiting, it's pretty simple to make a decent living and even make a lot of money. And so it was like, okay, well, I'm going to take a little bit of a risk. And in a year from now, things will be great, and I'll be making a lot more than I was in my W-2. I'll continue to scale this business, and all will be, happy and gravy. Obviously, that didn't happen exactly as we had thought, but it was almost like a short-term diversion from the norm. And it was challenging because we were very interested in doing more real estate deals. Part of the other reason why I quit my job was to have time to focus on obviously building my recruiting business, but also investing in real estate. We started getting involved in multifamily syndications. And, if anybody knows that world, it got decimated in 2021 and 22. And so we were like, okay, I need to free myself up so I have the ability, brain space, and time to devote to some of the things that are hopefully going to improve our future more so than me just sitting in the W-2s. but going to dinner and hanging out with friends that are doing the exact opposite of what we're doing, and also thinking that we're crazy for, living in a not great, little apartment and, all that stuff. It was not the norm by any means. But we knew that it was like, live how others won't so you can live how others can't, is kind of the mantra that we had. And we were willing to live how others weren't at that time, so that hopefully in the next few years we can live how others can't. And that means, having financial freedom, air quotes, whoever's listening to this, and not having to work, or not having to work as hard, or, whatever. So we were taking a short-term hit for hopefully a long-term gain.
Yeah. Now that you've mentioned this a couple times in that response and in something beforehand, and I really want to hit on this, the alignment between you and your wife. How important not only was that for making the decision to take the leap, jump into business for yourself, but being able to navigate that first year, going into the pandemic and having a little bit more uncertainty than was originally planned. How important is it for a significant other, a spouse, a partner in life that's on this journey with you to be fully aligned with the end goals and the journey that you're looking to take?
I mean, it was paramount for my mental stability, frankly, because as the man, I grew up, in an older school household, right, where like you've got to provide, and I literally was making very, very little money, right? And so, if my wife would not have been fully supportive and aligned, it would have potentially been devastating from a life and all that fun stuff. And I never woke up. One thing I didn't do, I never woke up and didn't get out of bed, right? Like, it could have been very easy for me to just be, woe is me. I'm going to lay in bed all day. I'm going to just watch the news and just think the world is ending and there's nothing I can do. I did not do that. I woke up every day. I set my alarm. I went to the gym. I worked out, and I never felt any type of like anger or disappointment, or I never got any questions like, what did you do today? How did you, it was never she never looked at it as like it was, obviously it wasn't my fault, because nobody's fault for that, but it never felt like it was like, oh God, like you ruined our lives kind of thing. And so credit to her. Like, I don't know how I would have reacted if I was in her shoes, because we were, she had to get up every day and do her job so that she could keep her job, hopefully. And luckily she did. And we ended up actually moving to Austin in October 2020. So we uprooted our entire lives, kind of mid-pandemic, even though my business was still sort of okay, and moved to Austin. And so, I think if somebody's going to do what we did, or even if it's just I'm going to quit a job and start a business, if you've got a significant other, at the very least, they have to be supportive. My wife was overly supportive, and we were, locked at the hip from a moving forward perspective. But that was paramount for me to be successful, and for me to kind of just wake up every day and do what I needed to do to, continue to push forward. And then eventually the dam broke, and then 2021 everybody was hiring, and it was great. And I could have folded shop and just not done that. And so, yeah, credit to her. If you ever listen to any of the podcasts that I talk about this, like I didn't do anything. I just kind of kept doing what I knew what to do. And that was put one foot in front of the other. And she was there to support me the whole way.
Has that support always been there? Like when you guys got married, kind of went through that process, was that something that was there from the very beginning? Was it cultivated over time? For those that, have been married for a couple of years, do you have any advice to them in terms of creating those conversations around alignment within their relationships, whether it's career or business or something else? You clearly have something that's very special there, and I just want to give you the opportunity to kind of give some insights that may help some of the other entrepreneurs out there.
Yeah, I would say, while we are both risk averse, we are both like immensely supportive and the other person's biggest cheerleader. And I think that happened pretty early on. I think we were pretty lockstep on a lot of things. So when we moved in together, we were very aligned on finances. She came into the relationship with no savings, but no debt. I had savings, but college debt, right? And so we kind of balanced each other out. And then, as we started to make some money and really put down kind of roots and really focus on the future, we were very, okay, we want to do this. Cool. We're both like, even though I was maybe more on the front facing of it, like focused on building a business or doing real estate investment, she was always my like sounding board and like, how do we feel about this? This is risky, but we could make, all these, potential upsides. So, I don't remember a light bulb moment when it came to that. Like we were always just very much aligned when it came to our ideal future. Even when we were W-2 and we had not read Rich Dad Poor Dad, we were just like, okay, we're going to keep working. We're going to invest and, we're going to try to, live the American dream, as it were. And it's just been, I don't want to say easy because marriage is not easy. It's it takes work for sure. But we were always pretty much aligned on, okay, we're both gonna do this. Cool. We're both aligned. She brings ideas, I bring ideas, and we sit down and talk about them. And then once we go all in, we go all in, and we don't point fingers. We don't say, well, you did this. Like, if we want to talk about real estate investing, like we've invested a ton of money in multifamily real estate that we likely won't get back. And while I was the driving force behind kind of finding and investing and doing all of that, I didn't make an investment without like her thumbs up. And so, while we wish that those events would not have happened, it's not well, you ruined our financial future and you did this and that. It's never a you. It's like, okay, what did we learn? What aren't we going to do again? And then we keep moving forward.
I really appreciate that. And I appreciate so much that you allow me to ask some of those questions too. I think back even on my journey, and it's been multiple different times when I had suggested that we do something very different from, moving cities to across the country to starting and or joining a family business and all sorts of things like that. And having a supportive significant other is, I think, one of the catalysts that I've seen for success. So I appreciate kind of sharing your perspective there. But
I will say this, not to cut you off, but like, she is the boss, right? So she knows like, and so when she got the job offer to move to Austin, it was still October 2020. It was still high COVID. She was going to get a job at a tech startup here, and we were not required to move. It was funny. We were just talking about this the other day. She got the job offer on a Tuesday, and she goes, I'm going to move. And I was like, why don't we just wait a couple of months? Like we just signed a new lease. Like it's going to cost us money to get out of this lease. And she's like, well, I'm going to move. You can come if you want. But I'm going to move to Austin because I want to get out of the Northeast. And I was like, all right. So that Thursday I was on a flight to Austin to find us a place to live. And then 2 weeks later, we literally moved. And I drove a U-Haul with my sister for 2 days from Philadelphia to Austin. And so make no mistake, there is a hierarchy in our relationship. But I'd like to think sometimes I get a little bit of input. So.
Well, there's clearly something that's working there. I love that. So you started Hire Tomorrow, went through the pandemic. You're still here a number of years later. Why start a recruiting company? What was it about starting this type of a business that was most appealing to you?
It's what I've been doing for my entire career. So it's almost like I did it by default, right? It's always the kind of adage. It's like if you are good at something, you start a business doing that thing, and you think you should be good at running a business that does that thing, and it's not always the case. So I've been recruiting, fell into it right out of college in 2006. And I had a lot of different experiences. I worked for a buy-side M&A advisory shop as their recruiter and helped them build a fractional CFO practice. I worked for a tech startup, an e-commerce startup in Philadelphia, and helped them grow. And then I worked for Comcast for 5 years. And so, I got to see a lot of different things. And one of the things that I really focus on now with Hire Tomorrow is I like working with startups and small businesses for a lot of reasons. One, they're fun, they're growing, there's a lot of energy around it. And two, I've found that if I can hire them a great employee, that person's going to have way more impact in a small business than that same person at a very big company. So I like to be able to I get to work with a ton of CEOs, a ton of C-level people, and they're like, hey, we need to hire our first sales rep. Awesome. Let me go find you a great salesperson that fits into not only what you want from experience perspective, but also your culture and what you're trying to build. Because it's, startups, people tend to think that they're more risky than a big company. I can say that I've worked for both as a W-2 employee, And I never felt more or less safe in either environment. In big companies, just like small, you are a line item on some financial person's budget. And if they need to make headcount, or they need to make a budget, or if they're publicly traded and they need to make their quarterly results, unfortunately, what's the fastest and typically the most expensive thing on a company's budget? And that's talent, that's people. And so they say they're going to do a restructuring, and then good people, and sometimes, poor performers get laid off. And that's just the nature of the beast. So as I relate it to what I do, I could 100% go back and be a recruiter or a head of recruitment at a company. But if I lose that job, that is 1-to-1, one salary to one company. With here, if I have a client and they fire me, or I fill their job and they don't need my services, well, that's one of dozens or hundreds or thousands or an infinite number of possibilities. And so I like those odds better than 1-to-1.
I really love that. That was one of those lessons that I learned kind of early on in this journey of being in business too, is what's actually riskier, having one employer that can fire you at any point because that is the only thing that actually tethers you to that thing, or having your ability to get however many clients, 10, 20, 30, 40, however many, and you have 1, 2, 5, 10 of them quit. You have the ability to go get more. You have others that, what's truly riskier. And it's kind of an interesting frame to kind of, look at the difference between the two. So small businesses, startups, how do you define small businesses when you're looking at who you're serving from a recruitment standpoint?
I look at it more from what does their internal recruiting infrastructure look like? So I've worked with 2-people companies, and that is a small business. I've worked with a few 100-people companies, but they have one HR person that is not a recruiter, and their only mode of finding talent is what I call the post and pray method. You post a job and you pray a great employee applies, and you find and hire that person. So that, again, that can be 2 to 300 or 400 people, essentially. And so I like to come in and say, let me help you find the needle in the haystack that you're looking for, the purple squirrel, the unicorn, whatever analogy you want to put on it. And I'll go out and find that person. And yes, there is an investment in paying somebody to help you find the right person. But the clients that I work with, a lot of them, I've built this business via referral. So clearly I'm doing something right, that they come back to me and continue to invest more because they're seeing results. And I know we'll talk about AI at some point because you can't not. But AI in recruitment is kind of an interesting time right now, because while it's building efficiency for recruiters, for small businesses, when they post a job, they are getting inundated with applicants, more so than what they ever have before. And a lot of them are fake applicants. And so I had a client the other day, they called me and they're like, hey, we need to hire a VP. Last time we posted anything above a director, we got like thousands of applicants. And they're like, can you just not post it, but just go find us the right person? Because they just don't have the time or the experience or effort and needed to sift through 1,000 applicants for one job, let alone 10 jobs. So we can talk more about that, but it's kind of an interesting world right now in recruiting where everybody's like, oh, AI is going to replace your jobs regardless of what industry you're in. And that's true in some instances, but and it's making life more difficult in others as well, which is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I am excited to get into the topic of AI. I always like to ask questions about it in general, but I think it'll be fun to talk about it from a recruitment standpoint too. Before we dig into that, I want to go a little bit deeper on kind of your business, what this actually looks like for some of the clients that you work with, things like that. So when a business, my business comes in, I'm looking to hire some team members. I want to work with a recruiter. I give you a call. Kind of where do you traditionally start the journey with your clients? Is it, hey, I've got this very specific thing that I'm looking for. Now I'm ready to engage you and help move through that? Or are there a few pieces before that I'm like, I think I kind of know what I'm looking for. Do you help in that process of defining some of those things for them? Kind of where is that entry point traditionally at for you?
The ideal is the latter, being involved as early as possible to help, especially small businesses, help them understand what they're trying to find may not exist. Because a lot of small businesses, they have budget for one hire, but they need to fill 3 holes, and they try to find all of those same skill sets in one hire. which either A, is very expensive, or B, doesn't exist. And so I like to get involved in the process early as possible. One, to just understand what they're looking for, but then also to be able to share some data on like, okay, here's other clients that I've worked with, or hey, let me go pull some profiles and see if this is what you're looking for. Because you may or may not be surprised that a lot of times when I start recruiting on a position, it's all called scope creep, right? Like, so the type of role I wanted to hire at day one changes once I start talking to people. It's like, well, I need more of this or less of that. And so I love to get involved as early as possible. Reality is I get brought in because they've posted the job. They haven't found the right people in the first 3 months. And so now they're like, we need to fill this thing ASAP. And they bring me in to help recruit. So either is fine. Obviously, I can do it at any point, but the earlier you can get involved with a recruitment partner, the better. Because especially an external one, if you can find a really good one that is focused not on just making a ton of money and filling as many positions as they possibly can, but helping businesses grow, I completely have a motto where like, as you grow, I grow. I don't want to be looked at as a transactional vendor that you call just when you need to fill a position that you can't fill on your own. But to be like, hey, Justin, we may be looking for this. Like, keep your eye out. Let me know if you see anybody, if you know anybody. And so that's always the best scenario, is to get involved as early as possible. So I can help you maybe avoid some potholes that you're going to eventually drive through. Or, we can just kind of formulate a plan together and have a go forward strategy that we're both aligned on.
You mentioned that there's a lot of times when a business will engage your services because they've already tried posting and then can't find the right candidate or can't fill the position. What, in your experience, has been some of the most common reasons why a business that's just posting something that can't get that position filled? What are some of the core common reasons on why they're not finding the right person for the job?
Sometimes they haven't defined it correctly. Like I said about trying to, put 3 positions into one. So you're getting, I had one client, they're like, I want somebody that's a CFO, like profile person, but also can sell and also has some like marketing experience. I'm like, all right, those are a little bit different skill sets.
If you find that person, I'd very much like to meet that person.
That's right. And so that's some of it is like they put this position out there and they have, a 4-page job description that's got every single role and responsibility that they could possibly have. So a little bit is just framing on like what they need. But then also it's the other thing I talked about is like, how are they kind of interviewing those people, right? So like if they're posting a job and they framed it incorrectly, they may get 20-30% of what they want. And so then they start talking to that person like, that's not what I want. So then like, hey HR, let's see other people. It's always like, hey, let's see other candidates. And then they start to get other people that are maybe more attractive on the marketing side versus a finance side. But they don't have enough. And so it's just this balancing act of finding the right person. I would say that's part of it. The other part is time. In small businesses, a lot of times the process is being run by the hiring manager or by HR or even by the CEO. And so what's the best use of their time? It's typically not sifting through applications, sifting through resumes, doing initial interviews. And so I talk to a lot of people, they're like, I can't devote time to do this. I thought I had the time, but turns out I need to hire somebody so that I can offload that time, the time that I need, because that's the new hire. It's always a chicken and egg scenario for that. But I would say the 2 biggest that I get brought in on is like, we can't find the right person because maybe they have framed it right. They're not posting in the right spots. They don't know how to interview. They don't really know what they can and can't ask on an interview. And then just, they don't have time to find and sift through all the people. So those are probably the main reasons that I get brought in.
I think it's a really important one for the audience to kind of recognize and understand, because it's very possible that if you're listening to this later on, you may have kind of fallen into one of these buckets at some point in time. I know a while back when we were first hiring, there was a few times when we had done this. I know many other small businesses that really ran into that first one, right? I'm going to try and just jumble so many things into one role, and it becomes, I need a business development person that can do networking, but direct outreach and phone calls and post on social media for me, and why don't you do this other marketing thing? I also need you to check my email and manage the pipeline and then they can never find somebody that can like last in the role because they're trying to do really 3, 4, 5, 6 different roles all in one. And I can't pay for an actual top level person. I'm trying to get ground floor, and it tends to not work out. And then even if you can hire somebody into that role, they maybe last 3 months, 6 months, year, whatever it is. You burn cash. You decide to let the person go, or maybe they quit, and all of a sudden you've got this black mark of like, man, I don't know if I want to hire team again. I know I need the time back, but now I just don't feel confident in being able to do that. So folks like yourself that do recruiting, I think it's a really important way for businesses to understand that I'm already planning to use capital, use money to be able to offload some of these responsibilities in this time. In order to shortcut that time, why not invest some of those dollars with you to be able to do that, right? So I think that's a really cool thing, and I know I've seen it a number of different times. So I appreciate you mentioning that one.
Yeah.
Let's shift into the AI world. It's one of those topics I truly do love talking about. So before we get into kind of how you're seeing it in the recruitment world overall, I'm curious your thoughts in general. What are some ways that you either personally and or within your business are using AI? What's your thoughts on it overall? Are you a fan of it? You not a fan of it? Just kind of curious on where you're at, what your stance is on AI.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big proponent of it. I think I use it more, when it first became like accessible to the masses, I did what everybody did. I was like, write me a better drip email campaign to target these people, and write copy paste. And then it's just, it's just AI slop, right? It's not personal. It's just very direct and all that fun stuff. So I started there. I still use it for that. I've gotten really around the notion that AI in its current form, and I have no idea where it's going to go, in its current form, I think it gets you 70 to 80% of the way there. I still, even if I do exactly what I just said of write me a better drip email campaign to target XYZ type companies, I still then edit it. I still then put a little bit of my own flair on it because I'm not a writer. So like it's very polished, very prim. And yes, you can kind of say, hey, this is my voice and whatever, but like I still don't think it's exactly right. And so I'm not comfortable just kind of copy pasting and putting it into an email. What I'm really using it for a lot of is as a thought partner. So is really as like, because I'm I don't have other executives on my team that I can bounce ideas off of. And my wife doesn't always want to hear all my crazy ideas about, I can go down this route or I can target this person. I really look at it as a thought partner. So I've created, projects, and I've even created a bot that like essentially I can talk to it as like a board. And I have like personas that I've built. And so one thing I'll do is I'll give it a scenario or like what I'm trying to do. And then I've got like a financial person, I've got a marketer and a salesperson. So I'm like, all right, how would they respond differently? And it helps me just to think through. And like, I've even used the voice version where I can talk to it and it can talk to me directly and I don't have to type, which is kind of fascinating and also creepy at the same time, where we had I think I was talking to it for like 30 minutes the other day, and it just felt like you're talking to a very strategically minded person. And I would ask it like, I always ask it like, what are 3 non-obvious things that I'm not thinking about? And it's surprising how much it'll give you, because if you just ask it like, what's your opinion on this? Or it'll give you kind of obvious things, right? Because it's supposed to give you things that you want to hear. That's why it hallucinates, even if it doesn't know the answer. And I'm not an AI expert, so I don't want to, full disclaimer, I'm not an AI expert. But so I talk like, hey, what are the non-obvious things that I'm not thinking about? And it'll connect dots that, I couldn't even see. And it's kind of interesting. So I use it a lot in that way. I use it in my recruiting business. It's really not quote unquote AI. It's really more ML and matching and things like that. All the tools that are out there that say they're an AI tool in recruiting are, most of them are just wrappers around a chatbot or ChatGPT. We can go down a path if you really want to, but there's the whole thing around AI interviewing, where if you apply to a job that you can, have an AI bot interview you. I'm not anywhere near doing that. One, I do a lot of executive recruiting, and I don't know how executives would feel about that, although I've heard that executives don't care. I think there's inherent risk in having an AI bot interview a human, because while you can control what the AI asks, you cannot control what a human responds. And if your bot is just capturing every single word that is said, you can open yourself up to liability if that person discloses something that is discriminatory and then they sue you because they think they got discriminated against because they didn't get the job. So I've even asked like AI interviewing companies, like what happens in this scenario? And they don't have any answer because they're technologists. They've built the technology. They've not talked to, and this is not a blanket statement. I'm sure there's great ones out there. But a few that I've talked to, it's just it's like a lot of, hype cycles. They push a ton out. AI is just going out to market, and VCs are investing a ton of money in it. And somebody's going to win, right? Some company's going to win. Somebody's going to get it bought, and they're going to make a lot of money, which is great. I think about it a lot from again, I'm a risk averse person. So do I want an AI bot interviewing candidates and capturing every single word that they're saying? I do not. So I'll pause there. I don't want to get on a rant, but yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff in AI that is going on in my world that I'm leveraging. There's just some stuff that I'm not prepared to leverage.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting distinction. I'm glad that you brought that up because I probably would not have thought to ask the question about AI interviewers. What is the liability behind that? I think I would guess maybe most business owners probably know that when it comes to different liability issues within a business, team-related ones have got to be up there in terms of some of the hardest ones to be able to navigate. So I hadn't really thought about the risks behind potentially having an AI chatbot or AI bot of some sort do an interview and potentially capture things that we shouldn't be capturing at that stage in the process. So that's very fascinating. Where do you see the most or the best use cases within kind of the recruiting industry aligning with AI at the moment? What are some of the things that you see are best use?
Yeah, I would say, and some of this, I'm going to use the word AI, and it's probably not, if you go behind the scenes, it's probably not pure AI, but a lot of the applicant tracking systems are now doing a really good job of, so if you've got a database and you've hired a bunch of people in your day, in your career, and you've posted a lot of jobs, you've got this database of people, right, that are in your ATS, your applicant tracking system, and you post a job or you say, I need to hire this salesperson. What it's doing a really good job of is looking backwards at some of the people that you've talked to or didn't talk to from previous job applications and surfacing them to you to say, hey, instead of going brand new to market, why don't you look at who's in your database now? That's existed for a bit, but I feel like it's becoming either more popular or the algorithms, the engines are getting better. Because again, essentially, if you've got this database of thousands of people that you've either talked to or not talked to, why not fish in that pond that you've already started versus going and building a brand new pond? So I think that's really interesting. I think that's going to help with efficiency. The biggest challenge that I see, or one of the big challenges, especially with small businesses and startups, is goes back to time. It's all about setting the system up correctly and training the tool, right? Training the AI to know what does a salesperson look like to you versus another client. And so that's the biggest liability from us small businesses, like, oh, we need AI in recruiting. What does that mean? What are you trying to solve if you're a 100-person company, you hire 10 people a year or 20 people a year? Maybe you don't need the latest and greatest AI. You need somebody to operate that thing and set it up correctly and then maintain it versus, just what's the shiny new object syndrome. I hate to be like a negative Nancy, but like I really think like AI is changing. I think it's just there's so much hype about it right now, and it's almost like if you aren't using it, you're falling like decades behind because something new's coming out tomorrow. My thing right now is like I'm trying to get good at one or two things versus that's a cool thing. That's a cool thing. Let me try that one. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think those are some of the areas that I've been really looking at.
Well, it's a really interesting point when you think about it, because I would agree with you in terms of, there is a lot of hype and there's a lot of different tools that are coming out, and some of them are truly new, really cool tools. Others are really just wrappers of, the underlying technology. but being able to take a step back and say, what are the core things that I can train something on, that I can learn on really well. I tend to be in the camp of I do believe everybody should be doing something with AI. If you're not using it, you are going to fall behind. But just because you're not using everything doesn't mean that you're going to fall behind. Take the time to actually learn one, really understand how these things work, because I think you kind of mentioned it in there, but there's got to be enough understanding of how to train these things. Right. I really think of it, and maybe I'd love kind of your thoughts on this, being in the recruiting space. I view, say, my ChatGPT chatbot, I view it as a team member, which means if I'm going to bring that person onto my team, right, they've got to be onboarded, they've got to be trained. I've got to kind of micromanage some things on the front end, help them understand the systems and the processes and everything else. Tight feedback, ask me questions, let me ask you questions. Like, let's go through the same thing as if I'm bringing somebody onto my team. Like, the difference between the outputs is night and day when you go through that process, just like you would with an actual person, versus I have this tool and I'm just going to ask it to do me something, but I haven't given it any context whatsoever. What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree. I mean, I think the tool, like, even if you just use ChatGPT or pick your LLM of choice, right? Even if you just talk to it, ask it questions, like, you're inherently going to get better at it. It's just like, to your point, it's just like onboarding a new employee. That employee is a blank space right now. You need to fill it with information, and you're going to explain it differently than I would. So if you and I were both recruiting firm company owners and we onboarded our employees, we probably would do it differently. Some of the content would be similar, but how you think about your business would be different, the way how I think about it or how I engage customers, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I think the LLM, just think of it as like a blank slate that you are able to tell it. And the good thing is you can tell it what to do. You can tell it who it is. And it can change, right? You can say, you're a doctor, you're a salesperson, you're a CR, you're Tim Cook, right? You can kind of create these personas and have them respond as if they are those people, quote unquote. And so I think that that's a super powerful thing. So I don't think you need to, in my opinion, you don't need to boil the ocean. You don't need to try every single email messaging AI app. You don't need to try every, SDR AI company. Whatever's going to align best to your business, to helping your employees or putting it into your product, whatever it is, and then just go after it, because it's going to take time. And that's the other thing. We think everybody's an expert on LinkedIn. Everybody's an expert on Instagram about everything. Well, they don't look at the hours and hours and weeks and months and years that they put into becoming an expert. And oh, by the way, you can ask ChatGPT how to interact with it, how best to interact with it. You can literally ask it the question, and then it'll give you the answer to the question. Like, it's, or the answer and the whatever. You get what I'm saying. Like, it's impressive on like some of the things that you can do with it. I think, there's a lot of crazy use cases that you can go after with it, but maybe that's for another pod.
Well, it was, I think it was a couple weeks ago, I recorded a short, video with a team member of mine on like, what's the best way to get started using AI? And I'm like, well, if you just pick a chatbot, doesn't matter, pick whichever one you want to start with and ask it how, like, literally. And I read off like this prompt that I put into like Gemini or something like that. I'm like, hey, pretend I am brand new to using these tools. Here's what my business is. Here's what I do on a daily basis. I have no idea how to learn about using this tool. Give me a step-by-step framework of how I can learn about using you as the chatbot. And it came up with this amazing response of like, do these things, then ask these questions and go through that. It's like, has there been a cooler time where you can actually use the tool to learn the tool in real time? Like, that's just absolutely incredible to me.
Going back to one thing that I mentioned earlier about like thinking about like trying to get or find somebody that has 3 different skill sets, right? And trying to sort out what that needs. I've actually encouraged and coached some of my clients to do that. So I say, hey, sit down with ChatGPT and explain your business. I'm in the process of creating like not an agent, but essentially a bot that they can go into and actually it'll prompt them through the whole process. But essentially sitting down and saying, okay, give me information about your business. And then give me kind of like, okay, what are you trying to solve? How are you going to solve it? Like, what's this person going to do? Like, really just walking through an interview, almost like I would with a client. And then it creates like, okay, I'm going to It's going to ask you a bunch of questions about your business and about what you're trying to do. And then it'll spit out, okay, here's the type of person that you think you should go after. Here's a job description on what you can, post. Here are some interview questions that you can ask that person to get really at the heart of what you want. And so it's almost like creating this kind of recruiting AI that definitely this exists, and you can obviously just use ChatGPT for it. But you can just sit down and talk to it about what you're trying to solve, and it can give you kind of a little bit of insight because it's going to know more about you because the more you give it. So it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, that is really cool. All right, I want to start bringing this conversation home, and I've got a couple questions I'd love to kind of bring together at the end of each of these episodes. We kind of have a 4-part system. So something on ownership, something on systems, something on leadership, and something on legacy. So if a business owner really wants to move from operator to true owner, what's the one thing they absolutely have to let go or delegate first, in your opinion?
That's a good question. There's a book out there called Who Not How that I would definitely have them read, because that talks all about, getting yourself out of the day-to-day. It really kind of depends on the business. I would say if I'm thinking about it for me, it's like getting out of the blocking and tackling of email and scheduling and all of that stuff that is easily done. And I have a VA that is amazing. And I just, I was in a coaching group and they were talking about letting go of anything that you have ego around. So what do you think that you do so well that nobody else could possibly ever learn to do? And that's probably you're doing it because you have an ego around it. And so I told my VA the other day, I was like, all right, you're going to handle all scheduling because while I can do it and I'm good at it, is that the best use of my time? No. So I would say sit down and really think about, this is probably a longer response than you were looking for, but sit down and do an audit of everything that you do on a daily basis. And then there's a longer thing that you can like put them in buckets of like, okay, what is the best use of my time? What's the worst use of my time, et cetera. And what do you love to do versus what are you good at? And then what do you want to be doing with that free time? And then kind of put it in these 4 buckets and then essentially take all the stuff that you're not good at, don't get any energy from, and you're not really the best person to do it, and push it off and do it to somebody else. Last thing I'll say on that is I heard this, and I'm not going to say the quote because it's not actually a quote, but one of the guys that I'm in this coaching group with, he was saying that if you're doing something that somebody else is better at and loves to do, you are stealing from them. And I was like, holy crap. Like there are people out there that love to schedule interviews. There are people that love to create content for social media. Can I do it? Sure. Am I the best at it? No. And so I'm literally stealing from somebody that gets energy from doing the things that I am not good at, nor do I love to do. And that just kind of reframed it for me of like, holy crap, I'm like stealing from somebody. And it's like to the detriment of your business, frankly. So sorry, that was probably longer-winded than necessary.
That is amazing response though, too. Cause it's, I'll raise my hand as one of the, business owners that has had to learn this lesson, and it's been difficult to let things go. Literally just this morning, I handed off email to my assistant. She had calendars, scheduling, all that kind of stuff. Now I'm starting to move email, so little by little to work out some of those things. But yeah, I think that's a really cool frame to be looking at. All right, on the system side of things, looking back at your own journey, what's the system, the tool, or the process that you've put in place that's given you the most freedom or has multiplied your results the most?
Hiring a stellar VA. I've gone through this my second, and I who not how'd it. I found a company that works in the Philippines. They've worked there for 25 years, even before Filipino VAs were all the rage. This person, her name's Nikki. She is by far, if I had a massive team and I had to fire somebody, she would be the last person on my list. And so not because she's less expensive than everybody else, but just because the what she provides from taking things off my plate, she thinks about what I'm thinking. Essentially, she like takes the next step. She's like, hey, I asked her to do something. She's like, you're probably asking me to do this, so you can do this. And so I've already started the second step. So I still have a long way to go of really being more efficient with her. And she even says, like, you're not using me exactly how I could be used, which I appreciate. That's awesome. And so that was by far the best thing that I've done. And I think anybody that's listening to this, even if you are a one-man band, hire an assistant. They are not very expensive. And if you need a good referral source, let me know. Cause it's unreal what you can do when you are just doing the things that you're great at and also drive revenue for your business versus the stuff that you're doing just because you think you should be doing it.
Yeah. I literally just had a conversation with another coach with an action coach that's out in Arizona 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, something like that. And he was talking about hiring a couple of his VAs and things like that. He's like, it is the biggest cheat code. Like I felt like I was cheating when I went and hired these people and started to see, the types of results and things like that from getting that leverage. So now I'm in the process of looking, learn those lessons quickly. Yeah. A lot of our listeners are really strong at the doing, but struggle sometimes with the leading. If you could give just one piece of advice to a business owner who's trying to lead with a little bit more confidence, what would it be?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I've always been more of a kind of servant leader, not somebody that's like kind of charged from the front. I'm always kind of trying to remove obstacles from my team's way and let them do what they're great at, what I've hired them to do or what I've promoted them into that role to do. And this is both combining my entrepreneurial journey as also when I was leading teams back in the W-2 world. My role was just to get them, to allow them to work on what they're best at and not do the stuff that they're not focused on. Whether that's, removing an impediment from like a hiring manager that's very difficult or a leader that that they're having trouble with, like anything that I can do to make their lives easier is going to make my life better because they're taking things off of my plate that I would normally be doing. So that's my model, and it may, like it or not, but it's been successful for me. And I think that's probably what I would do is just try to get your employees to focus on what they're supposed to be doing, what you hired them to do versus just taking all the junk off of your plate, if that makes sense.
That's a really good response there too. All right, we'll finish off with this one last question. And I did not preempt you to, think ahead of time. So we'll see what actually pops into your brain today. But what's just one book that's really shifted how you think about either business or life?
I mean, it's got to be Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I mean, that book is literally the one that changed our, you think about paths you could have taken. And, I look back every once in a while. There's another book, I know you only said one, but there's another book called Gap in the Gain. It's really thinking about, instead of kind of planning for the future, look at where you are in the present and how far you've come. And so my wife and I will, if we ever feel like we're not getting to our goals fast enough, or we feel like we've slowed down or something, we always just look back. We look, where were we 5 years ago, 10 years ago? If we would have said to our 5-year ago selves in the middle of COVID, we would be where we are now financially, in our marriage, in life, and et cetera. We would have bit your hand off for that, right? Like, it's like, holy crap. And we're not where I want to be, but we're way farther than where we would have been if we would have stayed in that same path. Sorry, I gave you 2 books there, but for me, I probably would not be where I am if I would not have read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, just to change the framing of how I invest my time, how I invest my money, building a business for myself, not for somebody else.
Yeah, such a great staple there. Justin, for the audience, if they want to connect with you, if they want to learn a little bit more about Hire Tomorrow and potentially do some work with you down the road, where's the best place for them to go for more information and or to connect?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all over LinkedIn, so check me out on LinkedIn. I know that's probably the standard response. I'm not as abundant on other social channels, so if you want to reach out, LinkedIn's the best. Email is just jdixon@hiretomorrow.com, and that's Dixon. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to answer any questions, and if you need help finding people, that's what I do.
Awesome. Justin, thank you so much for being here. This has been an absolute pleasure. I know I could probably sit here and talk to you for another hour, but gotta be respectful of everybody's time. So thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.